So you go back through your whole past, and you figure out where the pitfalls were, and then you see as an adult if you generated new strategies of representation and navigation that would enable you to bypass those problems in the present and the future.
So you can do that pragmatically.
Yeah.
But what about if you said they cause you emotions. Mm-hmm. These are things that cause you emotion.
Yeah, because otherwise they're not a problem.
And so how do you change the emotional response that you have?
Well, if you're no longer susceptible to the danger, and you now know that, then the emotion will disappear on its own. So this was tested by a man named James Pennebaker. So it's a very good question, by the way. Pennebaker tested the Freudian theory of redemptive catharsis. And so catharsis is emotional expression. Now, Freud basically believed, although Freud was sophisticated, that people were damaged often because of terrible things that had happened to them as they developed. It's not such a shocking hypothesis, and sometimes people have really terrible things happen to them. And he noted that if people got a chance to talk about these things, that sometimes that would make them better. Now, that was a shock to everyone, that even a physiological disorder could be cured by talking. But if you think it through, it makes sense. It's like, well, people had problems. Talking is thinking. Thinking is problem solving. Solved problems don't cause trouble, hence cure. But that isn't really how Freud construed it. He believed that it was the emotional expression, that the emotions associated with the event had been suppressed or repressed, and that the reason people were still carrying them because they didn't have a chance to fully express the emotion. That's the theory of catharsis. And Pennebaker tested that, so he brought people into the lab, and he had people write on 3 consecutive days for 20 minutes about the worst thing that had ever happened to them, or I believe the worst thing they had ever done, because that can also traumatize you. And then he had a control group just write about like a normal childhood experience to control for writing. And then Pennebaker showed that the people who wrote about the traumatic experiences had these beneficial physical and psychological outcomes.
Didn't matter what they wrote?
Yes. He did a content analysis. And he's a very sophisticated researcher, James Pennebaker. I interviewed him on my YouTube channel. He wanted to find out what predicted what produced health. And he had 2 competing hypotheses, really. One was the emotional catharsis hypothesis, and the other was more of a cognitive restructuring hypothesis. And so he analyzed words that were associated with emotion, like sadness and anxiety and frustration and disappointment. He coded all these emotion words, and also words that coded for deeper understanding, enlightenment, insight, and that sort of thing. And then what he found was that the more people used words indicating cognitive insight, the better they got. Right.